Good afternoon and welcome to the Frisco Democratic Club presenting Town Hall with Secretary Julian Castro.
Thank y'all.
All right, everyone. As you see, we have a big crowd. Go ahead and keep standing. We have a big crowd, so we want to be respectful of your time as well as the time of the Secretary. So we're going to get started things. I'd like to invite Mrs. Dilly Parker Mims to come up and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. You may take your seats. This event today is, of course, being hosted by the Frisco Democratic Club with co-host the Dallas County Democratic Party under Chairwoman Carol Donovan. The Denton County Democratic Party under Chairwoman Dr. Angie Cadena, as well as the Tarrant County Democratic Party and the Collin County Democratic Parties. Got some folks I need to recognize. Any members of military service members and their families, please stand up. We'd like to recognize military service members and their families. We thank you, we understand your sacrifice, and we thank you very much for stepping up. I would also like to thank the Collin College leadership team, of which I am a proud alumni, as well as the Collin County Police Department. We thank you all for keeping us safe and showing up for us. Now, at this time, I'd like to recognize anyone who is an elected official. So those of you running for U.S. House or higher, please stand up. Federal office candidates.
This is pre-game.
Those of you who are running for state house, state office jobs. Are there any members of any city councils here? I see one, two. As you can see, the energy is high, and we are so thankful the Secretary has joined us because we're building something right here in Texas, right? The road to 2020. As you know, the legislative session has ended, and there were 12 new Democrats elected to the Texas House, and they protected us against a lot of the bad legislation that normally comes out of Austin. We have one of them here with us. I'd like to recognize Representative Michelle Beckley. Issue number one for the Texas Democratic Party is taking back our House. And we're so happy this year to have not one, not two, but three presidential candidates from the great state of Texas running for president. Texas is the biggest battleground state. So anything that you all can do to be involved, we appreciate it. We thank your efforts. I want you to give yourselves a round of applause because we would not have been able to do what we did last year, getting Democrats elected up and down the ballot without your efforts. So thank you very much. Thanks. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to the president of Frisco Democrats, a man who I consider to be a visionary who's going to lead us into the future, Mr. Ira Burchad.
Thank you, Brandon. Wow, hello, everybody. Wow, that can't be good. Still on? Awesome. I hate when you have to say, is this working? Okay, welcome, everybody. Look around this room. Look around this room. We're in Frisco, Texas right now. This is unbelievable.
Did you think that you met him using our picture work?
That's right. When this event came together 2 weeks ago, it was my prayer that, number one, 50 people would show up. And number two, my iPhone would work on a tripod right here so that we could film this, and look at that. Unbelievable. I would like to thank not only you for attending during the business day. This is unbelievable, but I want to make sure I give a special words of thank you to Collin College. These guys are unbelievable. Collin College, Preston Ridge, Frisco, President Matkin has gone out of his way to make sure we had everything we needed. Susan Cordell and her events team has been unbelievable. Sergeant Stewart and the entire security team, and Colin Helm and his tech team. If you could give them a round of applause, I would appreciate that.
Turnout here is fantastic.
Of course, a special shout out to our guest of honor, Secretary Julian Castro and his team, Shireen especially, who was my point person for helping us plan it. So thank you very much for that.
Yeah, really.
Here's what I want to tell you. Frisco Democrat Club is on the move. We love our friends in Dallas and Tarrant County, and we love that you guys are here, and we're ready to join you guys at the table that you've done such a great job of setting over the last few years. Speaker Nancy Pelosi said, Texas is ground zero. Well, guess what? We think that Frisco and North Texas can be the epicenter of that ground zero next year.
Good. We've already started working on the next. Keep it up. That's awesome.
I have a question. By show of hands, who's following the presidential primary race? By show of hands, who watched last week's debate? By applause, who would vote for any of the 20 Democrat candidates over Donald Trump? And by a combination of applause, yelling, and cheering, who was thrilled with Secretary Castro's performance last Wednesday? I'd like to quickly thank the media, which I know they're thinking, what? You're thanking the media? But thank you to the media for being here. I'm sure that's a first. This is the thing I think is just so hilariously stupid about when the president says fake news. Think about what happens. He's on stage. He literally points to the cameras and says fake news as they're filming him speak. Does anybody else think that's ironic? Next time he says it, think about that. He's saying fake news, but he's the one talking. Okay, let me ask you this. Are you okay with the embarrassment that our president has caused us in the last 2.5 years? No. Are you okay with the cheating, lying, and overall swamp that he's operating in? No. Are you okay with him buddying up to dictators while he repels our allies and friends? We can do better. Let's do better. Thank you again so much for being here. I'm going to call up Jason in a second. We're going to get this program started. Jason's going to do his questioning up here, and then at the end, the last 15, 20 minutes, we're going to take questions from the audience. Frederick, raise your hand over there. Frederick, Nick is going to be one person with a microphone, and Joel Ortega. So when we get to that portion, if you have a question, find your way to them, and we'll try to get some of them in. Okay, let's get on with the program. Jason Whiteley appears every Sunday in WFAA's Inside Texas Politics on Channel 8 at 9 a.m. It's a great show, and I've actually heard they have some really good contributors sometimes, too. If you Google that later, you'll know what I meant. Jason is a friend to the Frisco Democratic Club, and at this time, I'd like you to give a big Frisco welcome to Mr. Jason Whiteley.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. All right, guys, I'm going to make sure my mic is working. Let's get right to it. The person you came to see is the former mayor of San Antonio, the former HUD secretary under President Obama, and the presidential candidate who many analysts say won Wednesday's debate in Miami. So let's please give a big welcome to Secretary Julian Castro.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hey, y'all. Thank you. Thank y'all.
Thanks, Jason. Thank you.
Thank you. Congratulations on Wednesday.
Oh, thank y'all. How do y'all think I did?
You know, I wasn't nervous enough going in. I was just glad to get in there, do a good job, and then get out.
Were you nervous going in?
You know, going in, I was nervous about two things. First of all, we had 10 people on stage, right? So I was actually a little bit nervous that they wouldn't keep time limits and that I would get like 3 minutes the whole time to say anything. And the worst nightmare for a candidate in a 25-candidate race is that you get no airtime. People are like, oh, well, I guess we forgot about him. But I was happy that they did keep time limits and I got enough questions. The second thing is, and you all know this, and you know, it's not just somebody that's in this kind of setting, but you never know what's going to happen, right? When you have a big moment, are you able to meet that moment or not? And I was when I got on the stage, I actually didn't feel nervous, and that helped. You know?
Terrific. Let's get to some questions here. People who followed your career know you've always been mild-mannered, you've been measured, you've been judicious, especially in your responses, talking to me and other reporters who were out here as well, too. But not really anymore. 8 days ago, we had a clip when you called President Trump's politics, I'll give the two-letter abbreviation, BS. And during the debate the other night, too, you know, that terrible image of Oscar and Valeria, the couple who drowned on the Rio Grande, you said that image should piss us off, is your words there. We haven't seen this edgier side of you. Why not? And why now?
But you actually have seen that. For those of y'all that watched on April 15, 2014, some folks may remember that I debated Dan Patrick when he was running for lieutenant. I don't know if anybody remembers this. I think it was only,
In the Valley.
It was only broadcast on Univision, and it's hard to find that footage, even on YouTube, I think. But you may remember that Dan Patrick, a few years ago, was basically doing what Trump is doing now, demonizing and scapegoating immigrants as he was trying to become lieutenant governor of the state. And I was mayor of San Antonio at the time. And, you know, we got into it on Twitter and then challenged each other to debate, and we did that on April 15th of 2014. And I went at him, you know, because, yeah, my brother Joaquin and I are not, you know, the loudest people out there. We're very respectful. I'm a very respectful person, like people will tell you, which I think everybody should be, right? I mean, that's how we want to be. But I think that pundits and analysts have consistently, you know, mistaken that for, you know, some sort of inability to actually stand up and fight. Like, when it's time to stand up and fight, I stand up and fight, and I know how to do it. I just don't think that you need to go around like this president does, bullying people or being mean or, you know, I think you need to be respectful and nice. I also believe that that's one of the reasons that even among a decent number of Republicans, he has not translated in Texas, because we appreciate people who are respectful and nice, and you know what I mean? And even, you know, and I got into it, obviously, in the debate, but that was about policy also. That was not personal. It was about the substance of a policy. And when the time is there, I stand up and fight, and I'm effective at it. And I showed that in April of 2014, and I showed it again the other day.
We'll talk more about the debate in a moment, but should we expect more of that from you before Super Tuesday?
Of course, yeah, of course. We've got 5 more debates, hopefully. If y'all will just give $1 to JulianCastro.com to get to 130,000 contributions, yeah.
Mr. Secretary, you were the first Democratic candidate with an immigration policy plan that you rolled out. Congress, though, hasn't been able to pass for decades any type of immigration reform. Yeah. So what aspects would you be willing to negotiate to get something passed in Congress?
Well, let me just say that I'm proud that I was the first candidate to put out a comprehensive immigration reform plan. It's very bold. It's progressive. It basically says that instead of cruelty toward people who are trying to seek a better life in this country, that we're going to maintain border security, but we're going to treat people with common sense and compassion instead of cruelty. And it gets to the root cause of the challenge, which is that, you know, 144,000 people came here last month to the southern border because they can't find safety and opportunity over there. We need to partner with them in a 21st century Marshall Plan for Central America so that people can find safety and opportunity at home instead of having to come to the United States. That's the That's a long-term, smarter thing to do. And to answer your question, I know that passing legislation is the process of legislation, right? If you go into anything in life, much less dealing with, 535 politicians in the House and the Senate, thinking that you're going to get everything that you want, you're going to be rudely awakened. So there are, I'm open to negotiating those things. In 2013, you may remember that there were 68 votes for immigration reform legislation. It passed the Senate with bipartisan support, and then it went over to the House, and because John Boehner, the Republican Speaker of the House, wouldn't allow it to get a vote on the House floor, it died. If it had gotten a vote on the House floor back then, we wouldn't be dealing with a lot of the issues that we're dealing with now. I believe that on January 20th, 2021, at 12:01 p.m., we're going to have a Democratic president, a Democratic House, and a Democratic Senate. So y'all are going to help make that happen. Y'all are going to help make that happen. And so we're going to have a lot more leverage to pass good immigration reform. I'll also say, and I know some people agree with this, some people disagree with it, if the choice is between getting something like universal health care done, or fixing our broken immigration system, or universal pre-K, or maintaining a 60-vote rule that both parties have broken when it's politically convenient for them to do it, I'm going to go with actually doing something for the American people, fixing our broken immigration system, getting everybody health care, and making sure that every child can get on a strong start in their education. We would break the filibuster to get those things done.
Mr. Secretary, you mentioned the 21st Century Marshall Plan to provide more foreign aid to countries in Central America. We already give a lot of money to them. The countries, for a myriad of reasons, are corrupt countries. There's a lot of corruption in government from the cartels, et cetera. What makes you think throwing more money at is actually going to get to the root of the problem?
It's a good question. I mean, in the scope of things, we actually don't contribute that much to those three countries, to El Salvador, Honduras, and Guatemala. There is something called the Central American Regional Security Initiative, CARSI, that we've invested, I believe, in the last 10 years, about $9 billion in. So, all in all, we do, of course, invest some dollars there, but not on the scale that I think we need to help ensure that there's more opportunity for people and better security. I agree with you that we have a checkered history in Central America. There are probably people that were active in the 1980s, right, pushing back against some of the policies the United States had in Central America. And we also have had these strongmen dictators in some of these countries that use the United States as a foil to drum up support in their own country. So I'm not naive about, the complications of dealing with these countries. But I do think that if I'm elected president, that I'm going to have a unique and unprecedented opportunity to try and put us on a different path with Mexico and the rest of Latin America. And I would focus my efforts on those three countries, and specifically stemming the flow of people that are coming into Mexico and then into the United States. The good news there also is that the president of Mexico, AMLO, that's his vision as well, for Mexico to be involved in doing their part to create safety and opportunity in these Central American countries. So, if we're doing our part and Mexico is doing its part, and it should, then I think that we're going to get to a solution to this challenge in a smarter and less costly way than if we just go build a wall, right? Or if we continue to put these little children in tents in 100-degree heat in the middle of the desert. That's an ongoing cost. That's a cost that we're going to continue to bear. And it's a cost not only to the pocketbook, but to the soul of this country. That's the greater cost, to the soul of this country. I think the smarter thing to do is that Marshall Plan, and to make it successful. The other part of my immigration plan, that I wish received more attention is that I've said, look, I hear all the time from people that say, why are you just talking about undocumented immigrants or folks that are seeking asylum? Well, I'm speaking up for them because they They deserve it and they need a voice, especially right now. But people also say, and I agree with, hey, what about the legal immigration system? You know, people say my relative has been waiting for a long time, or I know of coworkers or neighbors whose relatives have been waiting for, and I tell them, look, we need to fix both of those things. And so in my immigration plan, it calls for stronger family reunification, the ability to bring family members over here. It calls for increasing the number of visas in a number of different categories. And it also calls for increasing the number of refugees to what we're statutorily allowed to do, which is about 110,000 people. In the Obama administration, it reached a peak of about 70,000. Right now, it's between 30 and 40,000. There are probably folks here who have had neighbors who are refugees, or you've been part of communities here in North Texas where refugees have come from different parts of the world. Folks remember in the 70s, Vietnamese community that came to the United States, right? Different African communities that have come more recently. They add a lot to this country. And I know we're going to talk about other things, but let me just cap this off by saying something that I think a lot of people, especially on the right wing, take as politically incorrect. But we have a president that is fond of telling people, and you have the other side that says, oh, you know, if you can't take it, then you're a snowflake, right? Which I reject that word. But let me be politically incorrect here, okay? We need a lot of the people that want a better life in the United States, right? What's happening right now in this country, in our country, is that we have baby boomers that we should be taking care of that are turning 65 at record numbers for their generation, drawing down on Social Security. We want to make sure that Social Security is always solid, always there for them. I don't believe in trimming Social Security or going in a negative direction. I think, in fact, we should make it stronger because you have that big generation that's coming through. So we have that happening. At the same time, last year, we had the lowest birth rate in 32 years in this country. We have a declining birth rate. We see countries around the world like Japan that are struggling economically. There's a drag on their economy because they have an aging population. Right? We have industries right now here in Texas and in other states, whether it's the hospitality industry, the construction industry, the agriculture industry, that already rely to a large extent on these immigrants. We need a young and healthy, vibrant workforce. We can, through immigration reform, make sense of all of this to benefit all Americans and make sure that this country is stronger economically and better for all of us and all of our families in the years to come. But what doesn't make sense is scapegoating them, treating them like animals, which some of them are being treated like right now, overcrowded, sleeping on the floors, not given toothbrushes or soap. That doesn't do justice to who we are as Americans or as human beings. And I have a better, more effective plan.
Let's dive into that. Some specifics of the plan. One thing that got some attention the other night in Miami was the repealing Section 1325 of the Immigration Code, which would decriminalize illegal entry. Explain to us, what would your administration tell border officials then if that actually happens? I mean, what should happen to these people who come in? What's the actual mechanics?
Yeah, sure.
What would that look like?
Yeah, so
for the
this is a
down
conversation that I had with Congressman O'Rourke. And again, let me say, the disagreement was policy. It wasn't personal. That's
we'll get into that conversation in a minute with Congressman O'Rourke. I'm curious about the mechanics of this.
So in the late 1920s, we passed Section 1325 of the Immigration and Nationality Act. Y'all may have seen some of the articles on this section of the law. It was passed by a reputed segregationist that celebrated the lynching of black men. And it was very much seen as a way to control who could get in at the time to the country. Even though it was put into law, it treated border crossing as a criminal offense, for the longest time, up until about the early 2000s, it actually was only treated as a civil offense. The federal government didn't bother to incarcerate people for it. They didn't pursue it, border crossing, as a criminal offense. So that's to say that everybody that thinks that this is somehow radical, that we've never done this before, no, we actually used to do this for decades and decades, treat it as a civil offense, not a criminal offense, even though this book was on the law, this law was in the books. Post 9/11, the Bush administration started treating it more like a criminal offense. And then that kept up through Obama, and it really amped up under Trump. Trump is the first one, I think, to weaponize it, to specifically cruelly separate very large numbers of parents from their children. Because it's a crime, they can incarcerate the parent and separate that parent from their child. That's the law that allows them to do that. So what I said was, if we want to end family separation and guarantee that a future administration does not do that, does not separate children, then we need to repeal that section. To answer your question, that doesn't mean that we don't have border security. We have 654 miles of fencing. We have thousands of personnel at the border. We have planes. We have boats. We have helicopters. We have guns. We have security cameras. We have Texas, the state of Texas, that spends $800 million of its own money on border security. If somebody comes here and they present themselves for asylum, then what I've said is we need an independent immigration judiciary court system with more judges and more support staff so that we can get them an answer. We get them an answer. Right now, as many folks here know, people are waiting for years and years in limbo. There's no reason for that. If they're going to get asylum, they should be granted asylum. If they're not going to be granted asylum, and not everybody will be, right, then they don't get asylum, right? If somebody is undocumented, then they have the opportunity either to make some sort of claim that could get them the opportunity to stay or not. There's still a proceeding that they're in. They're still in process of going to court. So this is not saying that every single person that gets into the country or comes to the country is going to remain here. The point I made the other night was if we're worried, I know we should be, about drug trafficking and human trafficking and weapons trafficking, we have statutes in Title 18, 21, and 22 of the U.S. Code that specifically deal with those crimes. I've said if somebody commits a crime, I don't care who they are. I don't care if they're undocumented or if they're a citizen. If you commit a crime, one of those crimes, human trafficking, drug trafficking, rape, murder, you should be punished. Right? We're going to punish people. But that's separate and apart from somebody that is desperate, a mom and a child, or like we saw Oscar Martinez and his daughter Valeria that are seeking a better life. We should not criminalize desperation. I will not criminalize desperation. That's separate from drug trafficking and human trafficking.
So it would go back to the pre-9/11 way of doing things, essentially, for the troops on the ground there, the officials on the ground.
Yeah, it would go back to pre-9/11 and how that's treated.
How they would process it.
The border crossing is treated, yeah.
Okay.
With a better court system to actually handle all of the caseload.
Now, you alluded to it several times this afternoon, so I suggest, I figured you probably had multiple questions about the Miami debate, and when you tangled with the other Texan in the race, Beto O'Rourke. Have you talked to him since then?
No, not really. We all saw each other right in the breaks, and then right after that. Of course, I said, hello, but we haven't really had a chance to talk. At the same time, I didn't take that as particularly personal because we stayed on policy. There was nothing that was personal that was exchanged. I had talked to him before. We ran into each other like 2 days before in an airport and said hello, and our team said hello. And, my brother and I were happy to campaign for him when he ran for Senate against Ted Cruz, and he's always been nice to us. And so, yeah, this is not, the media like to make everything personal right away. It really is not personal. It's about the policy.
You said he needed to do his homework, so that was some.
That was about the policy.
Do you regret that at all? A public confrontation like that?
No.
Looking back?
No, because I know, first of all, what I do take in a personal way is this issue. I grew up with a grandmother who had come from Mexico when she was 7 because her parents had died, and she grew up with her closest relatives in San Antonio. And I remember my grandmother, even when she was in her 70s and my brother and I were growing up, crying because she never had a chance to say goodbye to her mom. Her mom was very sick, and they took her, and she felt like she never had a chance to say bye. So here was this 70-something-year-old woman crying like a little girl. So I saw that. I can only imagine what these kids must be feeling when they're sleeping like prisoners on a cold concrete floor and, don't know where their parents are, have no idea when they're going to be let out, like what kind of life they're going to be able to lead, how that's going to scar them. I saw in a different way how it scarred my grandmother. The other reason that I don't blink twice about that is because do you think that if I go up against Donald Trump, that Trump is going to be nice on the debate stage? I mean, you want to know that somebody can go in there and hold their own and come out on top, right? You don't want to send somebody up against Donald Trump that ain't going to be able to do the job on that debate stage. And I think what people saw the other day is that I can get the job done.
Well, let me ask you another question about that, too. You often speak of your mom, too, Rosie, in her activist years back in the 70s. I read that she's told you to give them hell when you're out on the campaign trail.
Yeah. No,
I'm curious, so what kind of advice did she give you after, pre-debate and post-debate? Did she text you? Did she call you? What?
Oh, just you did a great job.
Seriously, what did she say? That's not what she said.
No,
That's not what she said.
People often think that my mother is like this, the Manchurian candidate mother that's like, controlling the. That's not true. I mean, my mother actually was a wonderful mother. Maybe the best way to describe my mom is that I never remember my mom if I walked into a room. You know how as a parent, and I have a 10-year-old girl and a 4-year-old boy, sometimes as a parent, like if you're on the phone or something or talking to somebody, you say, hey, shh, or like, hold on, step out of the room, or like we're talking. I never remember my mother doing that. She always put my brother and me ahead of everything else. I remember my mom once tossed a set of keys at me, like just, giving them to me, like tossed them like 2 feet or 3 feet, and they accidentally hit me here in the eye. Not that hard, but she would never toss keys at me again. Would never toss keys, even though it barely did anything, She spanked Joaquin and me one time in our whole life, which was when we ran out into the street. That probably just, But, so the other night, she just said congratulations. But what she has said is that she's very proud also. And I actually was very happy to have her there. She's 72 now. And, thankfully she's in decent health. I really feel like I'm getting to live out what she wanted, for herself and for a whole generation of people, of women and of people of color that were locked out of a lot of opportunity, that now she gets to see her son on the stage debating for President of the United States. And so that was a very special moment.
As you and your staff well know, the Democratic presidential nominee is going to need suburban women to flip over from the GOP, women who've often voted Republican. What's your message to them, especially in Collin County, where there are quite a few of them? They might be they might be a little more conservative, but might not fully support the current administration.
Sure.
What do you tell those that segment out there?
That we can create a country where your child can get a great education because they have a strong partner in Washington that understands that we need to work with state and local officials so that your child can get a better education, that I'm going to work hard every day so that you and your family can have good health care in this country when you need it, and you don't have to worry that it's not going to be there, and that I'm going to work every day so that everybody in this country has good job opportunity, and that we push things like the Equal Rights Amendment and equal pay for equal work, and that I fully recognize what's on the line when it comes to the right to choose, the right of women's reproductive health care, and the right to get an abortion in this country. That's under assault, and I will defend it. I think that what you can tell in Texas is that there are a lot of people who may have leaned Republican in the past that are much more open to voting for a Democrat. I think that was part of the reason that Lizzie Fletcher won down in the Houston area, that Collin Allred, who's a fantastic representative, won here. And my message is that we can have an America that works for all of us, and that focus is not on trying to make the country anything again, but trying to make it better than it ever has been in the future. That's what I'd say.
Democratic voters in this room and all across the country are going to have a lot of choices when it comes to Super Tuesday especially. Tell them how you differ most from Joe Biden, from Kamala Harris, from Elizabeth Warren.
Several ways. I think in experience, my experience, there are very few of us, but my experience is executive experience, a track record of getting things done, having served as mayor of the 7th largest city of San Antonio, and also as HUD secretary. When I was HUD secretary, I managed a $48 billion budget, 8,000 employees with 54 different field offices across the United States. And so I have been in charge of something. I think if you want a president that has a track record of getting things done. When I talk about expanding educational opportunities, I'm not just talking. When I was mayor of San Antonio, we ran a ballot initiative that I led called Pre-K for SA, asking the voters to raise the sales tax by 1/8 of a cent, basically cost the average person $7.81 a year, so that we could significantly expand high-quality full-day pre-K for 4-year-olds, right? Because of that, that city has one of the best pre-K programs in all of the United States now. Right? So, experience. I have a different vision for the future of this country, I think, than anybody has articulated. Those of y'all who have followed the campaign know that I've been talking about the need to move forward as one nation with one destiny. And for me, I believe that that destiny is for us to be the smartest, the healthiest, the fairest, and the most prosperous nation on earth. The smartest, the healthiest, the fairest, and the most prosperous nation. And I haven't heard any other candidate articulate that kind of comprehensive vision for the future of our country in the same way. Because I want people to know it's not just, we've been talking about immigration a lot today, but it's not just about one issue. All of these things are connected. They all go together. The ability of our child to get a good education with their job opportunities later. I see folks from Moms Demand here. But, you know, we think about it, making sure that we do something about common sense gun reform so that our children can learn in schools better without having an anxiety in some places about what might happen in their classroom, right? I went to Flint, Michigan recently and then released a plan on how we would make sure that lead is no longer a major public health threat. But you think about how that intersects with the fact that where people live often determines whether they can do something like drink clean water and breathe clean air. Right? So out of all the candidates, I think that in the plans that I've released and the vision that I have for the future of the country, I've actually connected the dots of economic empowerment and social justice and racial justice better than anybody has. And then finally, I can win Texas. I can win here in this state. If I'm the nominee, look, we lost Michigan, Wisconsin. We have to remind folks, Hillary Clinton won that election in terms of the popular vote. I mean, she won by 2.8 million more votes, right? But he got a narrow electoral college victory. So I can go back and get the 75,000 votes that we lost by in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. And I believe that I'm the party's best chance to get the 11 electoral votes of Arizona, the 29 electoral votes of Florida, despite my last name, and the 38 electoral votes of Texas. That's 78 electoral votes that I believe we can swing in the 2020 election. And y'all are really, the folks in this room from all like 4 or 5 counties that are here, are the reason that we're within striking distance of that. And so that's one of the things that I believe makes me different from the other candidates, is that I can go and get back what we lost and then expand the map in 2020. And I believe change for a long time the trajectory of states like Texas and Arizona.
Let's talk about let's talk about history for a moment. Incumbent presidents rarely get tossed from a second term, especially when the economy is doing well, as it is today. Where do you see that path to victory?
Well, I mean, I think people have baked in the idea that Barack Obama is responsible for a large part of the economic success that we're having today. Right? I mean, we have to remember that when Barack Obama took office, we were losing 700,000 jobs a month. And then we went on, starting in about April or May of 2009, we went on a streak of about 80 months, the longest streak of positive job growth in this country's history. So this president is like the football team that got the ball at the opponent's 2-yard line. You know? He got the ball at the 2-yard line, and then he advances it like 1 yard, and he's claiming that he got you the whole 99 yards, you know, to the brink of the end zone. People have baked in, I believe, enough people that we're doing well in this country, not because of Donald Trump, but in spite of Donald Trump. And so if they were going to give him credit for this economy, I think they would have given him credit a long time ago, because he's bragged like he was he's the only reason that we're doing well, which is not true. One of my critiques of the Obama administration was that I don't think that President Obama fully ever took enough credit or got enough credit for what he did with the economy. This guy takes way too much credit for what he's done, you know, and the economy, because it's all for show. Same thing with his, you know, the North Korea appearance yesterday. It's always the symbolism and the show. It's the circus. It's not the substance with him.
I have 2 more questions for you, then we're going to get some questions from the audience here as well, too. Let's talk about education for a moment. Your education plan is another, I think, of 3 policy proposals you've laid out, Mr. Secretary. Universal pre-K on a national level, but also tuition-free public college. Explain how this would work. I mean, universities are run by the states. How are you going to force states to let my kids go to school for free?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I would say we're going to force states. We would incentivize states with revenue and partner with them to be able to offer tuition-free public state universities, partner at the local level with community colleges, and then with job training or certification programs. And also, as I talk about in my plan, invest in trade education in high schools so that people can get a running start. You know, I visited some of these trade high schools in New Hampshire and in Iowa, here in Texas as well when I was mayor. I'm very impressed with them, and we need to do all of those things. But in terms of how's it going to work, I mean, we would fund, the federal government would partner with states to fund part of the cost of providing that education. And this also is not a radical idea. There are folks in this room that went to UT or an A&M. You remember that just a generation or 2 ago, it was like $50, $100 a credit hour for a semester. Do folks remember that? Anybody remember that? Now, that's not what it is today, for sure. But you know, up until the late 1970s or early 80s, the University of California system was tuition-free. UT was almost tuition-free. So this is not something that the United States has never done, that we can't do. We need the political will, and we need to make the investment to do it.
And you would pay for this with the repealing the Trump tax cuts, the tax on Wall Street, is that what I read?
Yeah, I would in different ways, and we're going to release our plan also on how we would pay for it, because I think the American voters deserve to know if you're proposing things, well, how are you going to pay for it, right? I come, you know, originally from local government, and in local government we had to have a balanced budget, and so you had to pay for everything, right? So we are going to release that, and you know, I give credit to, for instance, Senator Warren, who has put out her proposal, her wealth tax on how you would pay for that. And 1 or 2 others that have done the same. We're going to do that during the course of the campaign before anybody votes. But in general, I would repeal the Trump tax cuts, which are $2.3 trillion, and replace that with something that actually works for the middle class and the working poor. I would raise the top marginal tax rate and ask folks at the very top to pay more. I would also raise the corporate tax rate and close loopholes, because I've seen, like you have, that we have companies like Amazon that made more than $11 billion in profit last year that paid no federal taxes. Right? How is it that you and your family paid more federal taxes out of your wallet, your checkbook, than Amazon? It doesn't make any sense. So I would expect more from big corporations. I would also look for ways that are not in the tax code, but are effective ways that we can fund programs. Just a very quick example, the National Housing Trust Fund. We stood up the National Housing Trust Fund in 2015 to provide housing for people who make less than 30% of the area median income. They're known as extremely low-income individuals, the poorest of the poor Americans. We did that with a transaction fee on Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. So every time they do a transaction, there's a little bit of money that goes into that fund. Those are the kinds of things that we can also do that will provide revenue for the initiatives that I think are necessary so that everybody can prosper. My vision for our future is an effective 21st century safety net for America so that everybody can thrive.
Last question I have before we get to the audience here, too, more personal here. Before you decided to run, what was a Friday night like for you? What did you do? Where'd you go?
Probably like to get pizza with my kids and my wife, Erica, and just more free time, right?
Do you see them very
These
much
days, no, and that's the hardest part, actually, is having, I said my daughter Karina is 10 and my son Christian is 4, just being away. I was gone at some points toward the beginning of the campaign for 7 or 8 days, and I told my campaign team that I didn't want to be gone for more than 4 or 5 days at a time. Because it really, those of y'all, I'm sure we have people here who travel or who do travel, and you know what it's like to be away. And yesterday, Erica and I celebrated our 12th anniversary.
Wow, congratulations.
Thank you.
It's fantastic. Let's get some questions from the audience. Frederick and Joel are on both sides here. Raise your hand and kind of slide over to the end of the aisle if you have a question for the secretary here. Joel, we'll have you go first here.
My question is a general one. You alluded to the fact that you were the head of a great big agency. Are there lessons that you learned as Secretary of HUD that you feel like you could use and would help you when, not if, you become President of the United States?
Yeah. Thank you very much. And what was your name, sir?
My name is Monty Forrester.
Mr. Forrester, well, and thank you for your service. I noticed that you stood up when they asked former service members to stand up. There's a lot that I learned when I was at HUD, different things, good and bad. I'll start with good. One of the good things I learned was that we can make Washington work when we have the political will and we align how we're working together. The best example of that, actually, in the Obama administration, was on veteran homelessness. One of the most shameful things about this country is that a large percentage, traditionally, of people who are sleeping on the streets are veterans. President Obama in 2010 released a plan called Opening Doors, and it was groundbreaking because it was the first plan on homelessness that said, we're not just going to reduce homelessness, we're going to end it, beginning with veteran homelessness. And the administration then went on this huge push and focus on ending veteran homelessness. This was an example of how Washington should work. They had the plan. They got HUD and the VA and 17 other federal agencies to work together. The administration worked with mayors. We launched this Mayor's Challenge to End Veteran Homelessness, and more than 800 different officials from across the country signed up. Communities adopted best practices in ending homelessness like Housing First and coordinated entry and other practices. And Congress actually appropriated the money for housing choice vouchers, they were called VASH vouchers, for veterans to be able to get a voucher and also the caseworkers at the VA to help them find what they needed. Because of that, between 2010 and 2016, veteran homelessness went down 47% in this country. So the lesson, like I said, is that when we have the political will, when we have a strong plan, and when people are willing to work together, I've seen that it can be done. Now I'll give you a negative one. One of the lessons that I've taken not only from HUD, but from being in public service, being a leader, is that leaders need to be big enough when they make a mistake to acknowledge that mistake and to learn from that mistake. That's one of the problems that we have today, not only with this president, but a lot of people. Right? When I was at HUD, toward the end of the administration, it's no secret that I was supporting Secretary Clinton. I was giving an interview with Katie Couric, who was at Yahoo News at the time. And under the Hatch Act, you're not supposed to mix your official duties with anything political. I slipped up and I did this. She asked me a question about, the presidential race, and I said, well, putting on another hat, but I was in HUD, I was in the building at a studio, putting on another hat, and then I talked about why I supported Secretary Clinton. Somebody complained that was a violation of the Hatch Act, and so we went to the General Counsel of HUD, and they said, you know what, yeah, that likely is. So I wrote back to the Office of Special Counsel, and I said, I made an error. And I'll make sure that doesn't happen again, and talk to our team to make sure nobody else makes that same error. That was an example, I think, of what do you do when you actually make a mistake. Right? We need to be big enough and honest enough with the people that we represent to acknowledge that. And I didn't make that error again. In this country, we have too many people that are sitting in positions of power that are too proud or too scared or too whatever to ever admit that they're wrong. And that hurts all of us. Right? And it doesn't matter. The other thing that I learned was it doesn't matter whether you're 40 years old or you're 80 years old. What matters the most is your judgment. What kind of judgment do you have? There are 40-year-olds or there are 80-year-olds with terrible judgment, and there are 40-year-olds with great judgment, and vice versa, right? And that was one of the things that I saw in that moment, that you always have to be willing, just like people want to take the credit when you do things in a great way, you have to be willing to accept the responsibility and admit your error when you're wrong. Right?
There's some more questions over here, too. Give it your name also, please, for the
Yes,
secretary.
hello, thank you. Thank you, Secretary Castro. I'm a real estate agent. My name is Jonathan Alpart, and I'm from an interracial and interreligious family. I just wanted to thank you first for the Fair Housing Act and all the work that you've done to fight discrimination. My question is, the housing crisis led to millions of foreclosures, $7.5 trillion in wealth lost, and according to your memo, which I have here, a lot of that has been regained. It's from 2017. But what the memo doesn't say clearly is which Americans built that wealth. We know that the wealth gap between Americans in the top 1% has never been wider. We also know that Wall Street investors reacted to the crisis by snapping up record amounts of property at bargain prices. According to The Atlantic, between 2007 and 2017, renter-occupied homes grew beyond owner-occupied homes by 6-fold. So my question is, are you going to continue fighting against discrimination, including economic discrimination, which we've seen against the middle class, working people, teachers and nurses, the poor, against the youth and the elderly of this country? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for that question. We put out my housing plan in 3 parts, and the third part included holding Wall Street accountable for the kinds of things that happened over a decade ago, but still continue to cause struggle across the country. There are a lot of people that used to be homeowners that are no longer homeowners now, and this is what you're talking about. And especially in communities of color, especially in the black community, family wealth was decimated. So what I've called for is continuing to orient our programs in a way that keep people in their homes, right? Boosting our efforts at fair housing enforcement, because right now in this administration, they're not doing a good job of actually enforcing our fair housing laws. Also, ensuring that we can do everything possible to expand the FHA, because the FHA, as y'all know, the Federal Housing Administration, basically insures mortgages, which allows people to make a down payment of only 3.5% instead of 20%. FHA started in 1924, and it used to be part of the problem when it came to racial justice, because it sanctioned, it wouldn't insure mortgages, basically, to homes that wanted to be purchased by African Americans. But today, it's actually part of the solution. When we left the administration, about 45% of black and Latino first-time homebuyers had FHA-insured mortgages. So it's a tool to help people that before could not get homes be able to get them, and I would say had a very low default rate. Right? These are responsible homeowners. We need to do things like expand that. And then I also have called for tremendous investment in housing opportunity in general that would affect everybody, no matter what your background is and where you live, in urban communities and rural communities, because we have a rental affordability crisis in this country, and we need to address that.
Jonathan, thank you. Let's do one more question over here. We only have time for a couple more questions. Frederick, let's do one more question here. No, I'm sorry. One more question behind you, the woman in the red.
Hi, my name is, oh, nope, used to taking the mic, sorry. My name is Laura Boer, and I'm a mother, I'm an educator, and I'm a Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America volunteer. Thank you for our shout out.
Yeah.
Thank you for our shout out at the debate and today. You know that 100 people die every day in the United States because of gun deaths. I just raced over here from the Dallas courthouse helping support a survivor whose son was shot and killed. And I just want, one of the most frustrating things I hear is there's nothing we can do about gun violence. And you mentioned common sense gun reform. I just want to know what that looks like for you and what is your plan to end the epidemic of gun violence in America.
Thank you very much, and thank you all to all of the Moms Demand activists for your activism. And everybody's very proud of what y'all have done to move us closer to the day when we can enact sensible gun policy in this country. So this is how I see it in terms of common sense gun reform. I know that a lot of attention has been focused on the mass shooter situation or scenario, and we need to address that. I support limiting the capacity of magazines. I support a renewed assault weapons ban. I supported that for the first time way back in 2004. The NRA was having a convention in San Antonio, and you may remember that the original assault weapons ban was from 94 until 04, and it was expiring. We were saying that it should be renewed back then. I also support universal background checks. I believe that we should strengthen our enforcement against things like straw purchasers and also enact red flag laws and laws that prevent people who commit domestic violence, for instance, from ever getting their hands on a gun. I also believe we can do things like gun buybacks and actions that work on trying to make, particularly in cities, those cities safer. In addition to that, there are some elements of this that we don't talk as much about, but I think we need to address. We know that one of the leading causes of why somebody dies through use of a gun is also suicide. People die by suicide, right? So again, I talked about connecting the dots. I think this is also something that I learned from my service there at HUD, is seeing how all of these dots are connected. We need to end the stigma around mental health and quit this division between mental health and physical health care. And make sure that people who have depression or bipolar disorder or falling into that or just feel like they need help don't feel that stigma, are able to come forward and are able to actually get the help that they need. You can imagine that I'm spending a lot of time in Iowa these days, and over the last few years in Iowa, something like 7 or 8 hospitals have closed their inpatient psychiatric units. Right? So people have to go more than 100 miles if they need effective mental health care. Right? We need to connect all of those dots. And during the course of this campaign, we are going to release our policy on guns. It'll be even more expansive than that, but those are some of the things that I believe in.
We have just 3 or 4 minutes left. Let's go to another question over here, Joel.
Hi, Secretary Castro. My name is Jordan, and I'm a public health and pre-law student at UTD. As you had said during the debate, you had mentioned that climate change is the most serious threat to our existence. So given the fact that we have about 12 years left before some of these changes become irreversible and it becomes too much, as noted by the heat waves throughout Europe, the 5 feet of snow and ice in Mexico in the middle of summer, I was just wondering, what is your plan to help solve it, and will there be a policy listed on your website for it as well?
There will be. Climate change will either be next or the one after that. We're already working that one up. Obviously, this is one that there's a tremendous amount of interest in, and we want to make sure that we get it right and it is comprehensive. All of the plans that I've released, and I would ask folks to go to my website, it's just myname.com. They have been comprehensive plans, not just one part of it. So, number one, I've said that the first thing that I would do on my first day in office is recommit the United States to the Paris Climate Accord by executive order, so that we lead again on sustainability. But as you all know, that's the easy part. That's going to be the easy part. I would actually go back to our allies and our adversaries around the world and try and get higher, stricter commitments from them on reducing carbon emissions. And I like the concept of a Green New Deal. Because we don't need to choose between protecting our planet on the one hand and then creating more jobs and opportunity. We know that here in Texas, right? We know that. And Texas can be the leader in the clean energy economy. In a lot of ways it already is. We have a robust wind energy industry. We have a robust solar energy industry. Right? So I would make investments in getting us to net zero and also creating new jobs and opportunity. That's what I did when I was mayor of San Antonio. I sat on CPS Energy's board, which is the local public utility, and we began to move away from our coal-fired plants. We shuttered a couple of plants and toward renewable energy. We did a 400-megawatt solar facility, but we didn't just get the solar facility there. We actually brought the manufacturing of the panels, which was 800 jobs, into the community. And I know that that industry has gone through some changes, and so it's not the same as it was a few years ago. But I see that as a blueprint of the kinds of things that we can do in this country. I don't want China or other countries to lead the way when it comes to job opportunities in the clean energy economy. The United States is going to lead the way.
We've touched on a number of topics here. We're actually out of time right now, but are there any loose ends you want to fill in, any holes you want to fill about the topics we haven't discussed so far? Anything else you'd like to add is what we say in the TV interviews.
Is there anything that I didn't get to?
Anything you didn't get to in the last hour.
That's the question that rings in my ear.
Right.
All right. Well, first of all, Jason, thank you very much. Absolutely. Thank you to the Frisco Democratic Club, to Ira and Brandon, to all of the Democratic clubs that are parties that are here, the county ones, and to all of y'all for being here today. And let's give it up for Collin College, too, who's hosting us. Thank you for hosting us. I would just say, look, we're going through this period where we're going to have to decide what we want to become in this country. We stand on the shoulders in this country of so much that we can be proud of. I know that my family's story of my grandmother coming here from Mexico, she worked as a maid, a cook, and a babysitter because she didn't even finish elementary school, and then raised my mom as a single parent. My mom raised the two of us, my brother and me as a single parent. And like I said the other night, just 2 generations after my grandmother got here to Texas, one of her grandsons is the congressman for the city that she came to, and then the other one is standing on that stage running for president. That's America. Yeah. That's the possibility of America. And it's easy, it's easy a lot of times, I think, because we see images like we saw last week of that little girl with her father, to be down or dark, right? But we should be so proud and so optimistic about what we can accomplish in the years to come. I know that my story wouldn't have been possible if my grandmother had stayed in Mexico, right? And I bet that's true for people wherever your family came from over the years, right? It's that spirit that I want us to take with us and to forge an America that can become a more prosperous place for everybody, that is smarter, that is healthier, that is fairer, and that where all of us can succeed. And as I've said many times, I really don't want to make this country anything again. I want to make us better than we've ever been. Right? And we're going to be better than we've ever been. And I hope that y'all will stay tuned to this campaign. The media tend to focus on 3 or 4 people based on polling. But I'm going to work hard every single day with the values I grew up with the lessons that I learned here in Texas, with the optimism that I have for this country, and the understanding that even though people are from different backgrounds, I still fundamentally believe that we want the same things for our families and for this nation, and that we need leadership that understands that and will try and bring the country together. I will work hard, if I'm president, to bring the country together so that you and your family can do well and succeed and reach your American dream. If there's one thing that has animated, that has always driven me in politics, is that I felt tremendously blessed with the opportunity that I've gotten in life here in this country. And I want to make sure that other people can get that same kind of opportunity too. That's what I'm going to work for. And I hope that y'all will stay tuned. And I hope I can get your support. With your support, I'm confident that, first of all, that I can win on February 3rd, 2020 in Iowa. And then Texas votes on Tuesday, March 3rd of next year, that we can win the Texas primary on March 3rd, and then go on and win in November of 2020, and on January 20th, 2021, right? Tell people, can't wait for that moment on the White House lawn when it's time to usher out the outgoing president, right? And we're going to have, I can imagine being there with my wife, Erica, and our daughter, Karina, and our son, Christian, and the helicopter will be there in the distance with the door open, like going, and all of the staff are always lined up watching the president, the former president leave, and we'll be there with Donald Trump and Melania Trump, and they'll be getting ready to go off to New York or Mar-a-Lago, somewhere. And I tell you, right before he leaves, right before he walks away, all of us are going to tell him, adios. Adios. Thank you all very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the time.
Thank you. Keep up the great work, y'all. Keep up the great work.
Thank you for the time, Mr. Secretary. Ira Bershad, the president of the Frisco Democratic Club, come back up and wrap things up here.
I think the answer they skipped is he might be flying to Moscow. I would like to thank, first of all, you for coming here in the middle of your workday. Thank you very much. I want to thank the media again. You know why? Because I want them to come back. Thank you, media. We'll end with some applause for these two. Real quick, the Secretary talked about having pride of family and how important that is. I've got two daughters, and I want to thank you because I got to see my daughter, Jessica, because you were here today. So thank you.
It was great to meet you. Great.
And I better give a shout out to my daughter, Rachel, who's in Houston doing a nursing internship. Okay, Frisco Democratic Club, we're growing. We need help. We need people, and yes, we need money to put on these type of programs. FriscoDemocrats.org. FriscoDemocrats.org. We'll be looking tonight, and I really hope some people can help us out. As we wrap up, the next Frisco Democratic Club meeting is July 21st. That's a Sunday. We're going to have Royce Brooks, the executive director of Annie's List. I think some of you guys know who she is, as our keynote speaker. After seeing this today, I think we may have outgrown the Rudies, and we may need to find another location. The primary election is Super Tuesday, March 3rd, 2020. The general election is November 3rd, 2020. Anybody believe now that elections have consequences? Get out and vote. I will leave you with this thought. Never doubt that a small group of committed citizens can change the world. It's the only thing that ever has. Let's change the world. Big, huge applause for Secretary Castro.
Thank you.
And Jason Whiteley. Thank you for coming.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Well done. Before you jump down, let me get a picture. Sure. I'll let you have.
The Secretary is going to stay around for a few minutes to shake some hands, take some pictures on the floor, please, not on the stage, in just about 1 minute.